Eurobox, in collaboration with Conoscere TV, is glad to present today a new published book entitled The Truth Behind the Orphanages, written by Irene Wangeci. Orphanages are not the solution. Family-based care systems, strengthening, enabling, and empowering communities will. We have the chance to have a little chat with the author herself, who's right now connected with us. So let's welcome her. Hi, Irene, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, and thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here to talk about my book.
So let's introduce it. The title is very explicit, but tell us something more. What is the book about? How is it structured?
The book's structure is structured in a way that it begins from my infancy to growing up and understanding what it means to grow up in an orphanage and how people perceive it. That is how the structure is. When I realized I'm in an orphanage, what it was like, what life was like being there. And then later, when I realized that growing up in an orphanage was different and what was different in terms of the effect on my growing up in comparison to growing in a family.
And when did you first feel this urge, this need to write down this book? What was your purpose and your inspiration?
It is very interesting that my inspiration came much later when now I'm an adult and I understand. And it was from a point of feeling that difference. Because you see, the difference comes in that as I grew up and I realized I'm mingling with other people, and I could feel the difference in terms of, for instance, if let's say they were talking, they'll talk about their families. If I was to talk, I'll talk about the orphanage. I think that sounded very out of the ordinary in comparison. They'll talk about their, what would I call it? Their community, their culture, their practices. You feel them express the sense of belonging and the way they feel loved, appreciated. You know, it made me feel a bit out of normal or ordinary because that aspect of belonging and feeling the positive attachment did not exist in my life. It's like I was an empty being that had been receiving the material gain, but not what is most important, the core things of every child, the inherent, the natural things that we all take for granted. They became very obvious to me that that's where my difference with them was. And hence, it inspired me to want to explain to the world, what does it mean to grow in an orphanage? And not only that, why for me as a person who has lived, experienced, would wish everyone understood that what we need is not more orphanages or better institutions, but instead to emphasize on strengthening the families, enabling families and communities to take care of the vulnerable and poor children within the family setup or the community setup where they naturally belong and will continue to grow as natural and normal as the other kids without being separated from the community, the society they belong.
Very interesting and of much value, this book. So, who's the target public? Who is the book addressed to?
The book is addressed to the public. The reason being that being someone who's lived that experience in an orphanage, I always feel that people do not have an understanding of what the impact is of bringing up a child in an orphanage, of bringing up that child in a family. So in essence, is to help people understand, the public, everybody globally. I mean, I didn't have any particular group in mind, but anybody and everybody understanding or having a feel of what it means to grow up in an institution, in an orphanage for this matter, and to help them understand what is the truth about growing up in an orphanage. It is not what they perceive, that the child has everything, hence has no reason not to be normal or natural, so to speak, but instead to let them understand that the material gain is not sufficient enough for the child. The child needs much, much more. That unseen thing that the child lacks by being separated from their family is what is very essential for that child.
Thank you very much, Irene. Thank you again for your time. We'll leave the readers to discover the content of the book, which is now available, and we want to wish you best luck.
Thank you for that. I appreciate, and it was a pleasure speaking with you about my book.
By disclosing her story, Irene wants to help unveil the truth behind the harsh reality of growing up in an orphanage. Between the lines of this book lies the hope of saving many children escaping what she went through during her childhood and avoiding them having to deal with life all on their own. The Truth Behind the Orphanages, written by Irene Wangeci, is now available in bookstores and digital platforms. It's a publication by Eurobooks.